This is a ramble on things related to astrology. I just got this message from a guy saying we're not friends anymore because I'm rude, negative, and depressed. I know I'm not depressed. I don't think I'm negative. But rude is definitely possible because frequently I do not accurately predict what other people will find to be rude. And I think like so much of that varies, you know, also from culture to culture. Like where I'm from, you're supposed to like aggressively draw people out. You're supposed to ask them questions. You're supposed to put the focus, like a spotlight on them. And if you don't do that, like if you were just to be like kind of just sitting there, or if you're talking about yourself, then you would be considered very rude. But here, it's considered rude to ask people questions because it's like you're interrogating them, you're invading their privacy. You're just supposed to kind of like sit more like a lump, and if you want to say anything about yourself, you say it, or you just kind of sit there. There's probably more going on that I'm not aware of, but anyway. But that's not really relevant. I guess what I wanted to say though is that knowing what transits I'm having in this case brings me peace because in astrology, the importance of things like harmony and getting along and being liked and being nice and all those things, that's like half of the planets. But then the other half of the planets are on the opposite side of that equation. They are about things like disruption, self-assertion, rocking the boat. It's basically you have like 40% of the universe is like don't rock the boat. The other 40% is like rock the boat. And then you got about 20% in the middle that just kind of goes from back and forth between those two positions. And that's one thing that I feel astrology has in common with religion is that, even though it's definitely not a religion, but it gives you a higher framework on life, right? Because without that higher framework, you can kind of get completely lost in trying to please other people and deriving your sense of self-esteem and success from the extent to which you are pleasing other people and getting their approval and fitting in and getting an award and all those things, you know. But from the perspective of astrology but also religion, that isn't really the measure of how your life is going, which is kind of it's practical because things like approval aren't lasting, you know. It's really temporary, whereas there's other things that you can build in your character which will see you through a lot longer and which you carry forward with you, you know, forever. And there are definitely certain transits in astrology and also certain things in your chart that mean you have to be willing to displease people. You have to be willing to rock the boat. You have to be willing to accept casualties in order to do the right thing. Because astrology is not about pleasing people. It's really about fulfilling your destiny and fulfilling your role in the grand scheme of things and building a character that you can carry forward, that will carry you forward through time, you know, like on an upward vector. And that is definitely not always the same thing as pleasing people. And, you know, that's one thing that I think is interesting about materialism as a philosophy. We tend to see materialism as something that is focused on science, but in my opinion, it really isn't at all, because science is really just the open-minded exploration of the universe, in my opinion. It is doing experiments and being willing to see the results and to learn and grow from that. Whereas materialism is the belief that, what is materialism? I mean, I guess officially, materialism is kind of the belief that if there's something that we don't currently have a branch of science studying, then that thing isn't part of the universe. It doesn't exist. But I think there is a much deeper thing that materialism really is, that is actually pretty sinister. And it's like you could have, let's say you could have humanism or something. You could have you have like spiritual belief systems, and then you have like mid-level belief systems in which it's kind of about being a good person and stuff, but at the same time humans are still kind of the highest force in the universe. Our opinions and values are like the ultimate judgment of all things, and so humans are kind of the highest deity that exists in like that mid-level type of humanism. But then I think materialism is really a lot baser of a religion, and if you see those people who promote it, they're usually borderline abusive in my experience. They're usually like really misogynistic, angry men who want to degrade women, and it's like, what does that really have to do with materialism? Because so materialism kind of worships a bastardized version of Darwin, because Darwin said that basically if you procreate, your genes will be passed on, and I agree with that. But materialism says that the meaning of life is to continue the species, and that just is kind of nonsensical, because if it's materialistic, why would there be this motive to continue the species? Like, where did that come from? It's molecules one day decided we want to continue the species. There's no explanation for why there would be a motivation to continue the species. It's just, that part is just kind of a mystical aspect of materialism, that somehow in this materialistic universe, molecules decided we have a goal, and our goal is to continue the species. But that's what people say in materialism, that the goal of life is to continue the species, and there's no logical explanation for why that would be the goal in a material universe, to continue the species. Like, what the fuck? But it's like, why do people like that idea, and why do people promote that idea? I remember I was on a video call once with this guy who was my hero at the time, John Gray. He wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and I thought the book was really smart. But he was like saying how the goal, all men have one goal, which is to impregnate as many women as possible, and they try to gain wealth and power so that they can impregnate as many women as possible, preferably women who are as young as possible. So it's like, basically, like, he's saying that the goal of all men is to be like pedophiles, basically, and that men spend their whole life trying to gain resources so that they can ultimately become pedophiles. And he's like, whenever people say this, they're like really angry, and if you disagree with them, they'll like start putting you down and stuff. And but so I asked him, I was like, well, if that's like the goal of life, to impregnate as many people as possible, and that's why men are trying to gain money, how come rich men don't really impregnate many people? Because if anything, rich men impregnate fewer people than poor men do. It's not what you see men do when they get a bunch of money. You don't see them go around knocking up everyone they can find, But he said, well, you don't know that they don't do that. They could be knocking up people that you don't know about. And so it's like, okay. But for some reason, which I don't totally understand, he wants it to be the case that men were created to try to gain power so they can impregnate as many people as possible, ideally becoming a pedophile at the same time. For some reason, he wants that to be what life is about, and I don't totally understand why. But I have noticed that there is a group of men who are obsessed with the idea that men are all about sex. And I highly doubt this, honestly, because at a certain point I realized that if men were as into sex as they like to pretend they are, there would be like glory hole stations on every corner, right? Because you'd be like, but what do you see on every corner? McDonald's, Arby's, Taco Bell. They're always coming out with new flavors of milkshakes, new styles of hamburgers, and you see all these men like in line to get their cheeseburgers and stuff. So, I mean, just using the powers of observation, you have to conclude that men are more into cheeseburgers than they are into fucking as many people as possible. But some men really like the idea that men are all about sex, and they're all about wanting to procreate and continue the species. And once again, why do men like this idea? And here's where I feel like I'm at risk of offending some people. However, I feel the reason men like this idea and the reason they promote this idea isn't because it makes any sense or that it's scientific. It's really nonsensical when you break it down. But they like this idea because they feel that it degrades women and reduces them to being potential procreators, or else something that really has no value, at least no value to men, and I think women do want to have value to men because it's our nature to want to be loved and, matter to other people. But when men can reduce women in this way, where their only thing is whether or not they can continue the species or something. Even the word species sounds really freaky, like something from a horror movie. Species. Then it just kind of really turns women into nothing, and it turns the relationship between men and women into something that's just really grotesque, men wanting to use women to continue the species, It's not even personal, it's just the species wants to be continued. That's why I'm fucking you, so the species can go on. It's really creepy. It's really creepy. I mean, I think that I really feel like materialism starts to really actually blend into Satanism at a certain point. But so the question is, why do men want to degrade women? And I think it's because basically when men are wanting to run away from the value and importance of women, it's the same thing as when they're wanting to run away from God. Sorry, but because women are more connected to that spiritual realm, and the materialists for some reason they don't want anything in that spiritual realm to exist or have value. They're not okay with God. They're not okay with the meaning of life being to do something good. The meaning of life has to just be to continue the species, just so the species can exist. It's they're not okay with goodness. They have some issue where they want to block out all things that are good and make it that life is just about those things which have no beauty or meaning or uplift to them. It's just wallowing in degradation, really. That's why I would connect it to Satanism, because there almost seems something reptilian about it, but in a dark sense, when the reptilian side isn't connected to the other pieces of ourselves. Yeah, this was just a ramble, and I'm not sure if I have anything else to say now. Bye.